What on earth can you do with all of those trees that have fallen? There've been a lot of storms recently, actually. So this is probably a pretty pertinent question at the moment. Or trees that you need to cut down. This is a having trees be something that you have to deal with is a way of life in the Catskills as much as having trees that you get to love and admire and tend to. Trees, it turns out, do not live forever, especially not if you have swampy land and a million super tall, skinny white pine trees like you do in my property, which is not ideal. And so I'm super happy today to have Megan Offner from New York Heartwoods, who has built a business around using wood that would not otherwise be cut down, either reclaimed, fallen, something that's going to be, that has to be cleared for some specific reason. And I think that Megan is also, our business is just down the road, essentially, from where I am in Ulster County. And I want to have this be, a pretty lively collaborative discussion. And so if anybody has anything that they want to ask, you can throw it in the chat and I'll just keep an eye out for it. But yeah, I guess Megan, if you want to just oh, sorry. And I should say, I'm Megan Brenwhite. I'm an associate real estate broker. I'm the head of the Upstate Curious team at Compass. And we are a real estate team. We cover around 11 counties, essentially anywhere you could think of as the Hudson Valley or Catskills. As I said, I live in Ulster County in Kerhonkson. That's where I am today, surrounded by dead and dying trees that someday Megan could tell me what to do with. And yeah, with that, I will ask Megan if you could, oh my gosh, it is a small world, Chads, cute. Megan, if you could introduce yourself, that would be awesome. So many Megans today.
I'm Megan, and, Megan Offner. I started New York Heartwoods 12 years ago, last month. We had our anniversary. And we started as a lumber company. So I had the idea to start stewarding forests. And I had learned in this Native American tradition, sort of like how one can take the worst trees first to improve forest health and use that material to make something. I learned from a guy who had a hardwood flooring company, and learn how to cut down trees and mill wood, and he had a solar kiln that he dried it all. And I was looking for a way to have a creative life that was beneficial to the natural world. Like, I was doing set design in the city and just building things and throwing them away, and just wanted something that mirrored my values. And this was the model that showed up. And so I this aha moment of like, this is what I want to do, but I was living in Brooklyn. I had no idea how. I ended up meeting someone with a sawmill 2 weeks later, getting to know he and his wife. They were close to retiring, and kind of took me under the wing and trained me on their mill. And I happened to move upstate to start milling full time the weekend of Hurricane Irene. So the model quickly became about like, what do we do with all this wood that's just literally, it's like a municipal problem. And we were helping people clear trees out of their yards, and just tree services were bringing truckloads for us to process. And we didn't have to work hard to get the raw material. And so I started selling lumber and slabs. We built a kiln, learned how to kiln dry. And then quickly people started asking for furniture. Originally, I subbed that part out because it was just too much to do on my own. And then gradually brought in a team, and we started doing furniture in-house. And I just have partnered with really talented people who are gifted on the fabrication side. So at a certain point, it became too much to do everything in-house. So we stopped milling and drying our own wood, but now I help people steward their trees through the whole process, starting with figuring out what the design needs are, and then seeing what trees, are down or need to come down. And if those two things if there's synergy between those two things, then we'll project manage the transportation, the milling, the drying, to get that material back to our shop so that we can make things, turn the trees back to the land where they grew, which is always really satisfying for everybody. And we work with homeowners, we work with architects and interior designers. We've done a couple commercial projects. So, we can do everything from, like for one, we're working on a project right now, which is 2 cross sections of a tree just to do a couple of coffee tables. And then we've done like a large hospitality project at a ski area with trees that were cleared. So that's, yeah, we're a fully woman owned and operated company. We specialize in custom fabrication. We have a line of furniture and then do a lot, I would say probably at this point, over 70% of our projects are with our clients' own trees.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is I'm gonna ask all the like dumb questions, but anybody else can ask smart questions or dumb questions too. But how long does it take? So like, let's say you have you come like, or what even is that first step? Does someone just say like, oh, a massive oak tree fell in my yard? Do they already have an idea, or do they come and like, do you just, when you come, do you sometimes just like look at what's there and come up with ideas together? Or do they mostly have some kind of concept or?
Some people have a direct need already, with what they want made with the tree. So if we're contacted, I ask for photos and dimensions of the trees, any sort of reference images or sketches of the furniture or materials that are needed or desired from those trees. And if those things seem like they might be a match, I'll hop on a quick call just to kind of talk through the process. And then we recommend that there be a site visit. So that includes, just like walking, seeing like what's actually there, and then taking an inventory, talking through the design, and then I'll write up a proposal. So like breaking down all the costs and the general time frame for how long things should take. And your first question, the process can take as little as about 4 months, like 16, 18 weeks if we really need to expedite something. It's better.
Look. Oh, one sec. Let me mute everybody else here. There we go.
We do recommend that if people have the time to air dry the wood the longer it can air dry, the kind of it does benefit the wood to a certain extent. Like there are a couple of different kinds of kilns that we use, and one of them is sort of like microwaving food. It's like the quality of the wood isn't quite as nice, but it serves the purpose if the time frame doesn't allow the wood to air dry and cure a little bit naturally.
What did people do before kilns? I don't mean to ask like a dumb question. Did they just dry wood over fire or sit outside forever?
Well, you can air dry wood. The rule of thumb with drying wood is about a year per inch thickness. And it really depends on the species. And like oak takes a lot longer to dry than say pine. But you can air dry it. And then if you move it indoors and let it acclimate for, a couple of months, it should get to like the relative humidity of your home. It's just like most people don't want to wait 2 years for, wood to dry to make a table. So we're able to expedite that, as much as people need.
So I guess is it just furniture now that you make with the wood from people's own land, or could you advise them on making, like flooring or using just timber for anything else? Or
Yeah, we tend to steer people away from flooring and paneling. It's not, the numbers really are hard to it's hard to make the numbers make sense with flooring. You can buy it so inexpensively.
Yeah.
The cost benefit analysis really, it on average probably costs about $9 to $10 a board foot to make something with your own wood. And a board foot is the volumetric equivalent of a 12 by 12 by 1 inch thick square.
Got it.
If that makes sense. So
like that's one of the things that's so hard for me to like wrap my head around is this whole board foot thing. So a board foot you said is 12 by 12. What are the dimensions again?
12 by 12 by 1 inch thick. So if it was, say it's like a 2 by 6, so it's 2 inches thick and 6 inches wide, 1 linear foot of a 2 by 6 is a board foot. And if you were to cut that in half and, open it up, it'd be like 1 inch thick, 12 inches wide. So it's, so you can figure it out. If you take the width by the length, by the thickness, and divide by 144, you get the board feet. Does that help?
How do you, I mean, when you go and buy like flooring in a shop, it's by
The square foot.
just by square foot, right? So
Yeah.
yours is like more like a mini, it's almost like having to calculate like a cord of wood or something, where you have to have all 3 dimensions.
Well, you need more board feet. There's a lot of material that's removed to make a square foot, because it's tongue and grooved often. So if you were to, let's just say like an 18-inch diameter log that's 10 feet long is roughly 150 board feet. So that would be enough to make a table or possibly a bed, like a headboard and bed frame. But with flooring, I mean, there's a couple of things where you don't necessarily know what kind of wood you're getting out of a log until you open it up. So if there's a lot of knots and internal cracking, like the amount of lumber that can actually be molded into flooring could be more limited, and
Right.
it's easier to use that wood in thicker form. Also, at $9 to $10 a board foot to process a small amount, it's sort of like, there's a lot of handling and transportation and just time that goes into processing a small amount of wood versus, processing it on a commercial scale. But those numbers tend to be comparable to a lot of species if you're buying thicker, wider, and or live edge material with like the natural wane on the edges of the wood. That can range from, $8 to $25 a board foot at a lumber yard. So when it comes to live edge material, it's a lot less than you might pay. We've been buying white oak and walnut for, upwards of $16 a board foot, for wide and thick material. So, again, it's like, depending on the species that you have growing in your yard or on your land, it can make economic sense to mill your own wood, but in some cases it doesn't. And especially if you're trying to get thinner material, which you might be able to buy at a lumber yard for half the cost of processing it on your own.
Do you think do people who come to you, are they interested in, are the people who come to you with who want you to make something from trees on their land? Do you think that's because I guess you talked to them about this. Are they interested in the environmental impact? Are they interested in having something that just feels more special because it's going to become an heirloom piece of furniture that will also last longer, that, kind of comes from their land? Or what do you think the common thread is?
It really depends on the person. Some, like we're working with an architect right now who's clearing land for a house and taking down the minimum amount of trees, but he's really interested in sequestering carbon. And so it can get really, some people definitely do it for environmental reasons, and some people do it for personal reasons. Like there was a woman that we worked with that she put an extension on their house, and in doing so had to take down her favorite oak tree, and it just killed her to see it go. And so we were able to make a table. We did this giant countertop a bunch of outdoor furniture, but we used like every piece that, you know, that we could from that tree. We had another client, like the tree was too close to their house, and they did the math, and like all of the money that they spent on furniture that, you know, fell apart or they didn't really like, you know, like they really wanted to invest in something that they knew was going to last and like they could hand down to their children, and like to say that it was a tree that like was in their backyard, and like have that story embedded in the pieces that we made for them was really important to them. So there's a range. You know, the hospitality project was like, you know, like they just they wanted, I think a lot more and more people are interested in place-based design, and being, yeah, just being able to say that, you know, these trees came from here. It's there is, I think we have to start being imaginative with how we build and design. You know, I think what's happening with the climate on our planet, like we're going to have to get creative. So this is kind of our way of just trying, you know, to work in a way that has the least amount of impact and it is meaningful for people.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So two things. First thing, I realized it's my fault that Megan, you sounded like crap earlier. It's my own situation, so I apologize. So yeah, see, you sound like shit because of my thing. So I'll as soon as I'm done, I'll mute, and then you're gonna sound golden. All right. So number two. So I drive around a lot, and I do this thing where I kind of like rubberneck into the woods and look at like down trees, and after storms there's all these like freshly down trees and things like that, and I think to myself, like, I can use these, like these are just gonna like either get shredded by the town, or they're if they just sit and, you know, decay, that's totally great too. But when they're that fresh and that like that good still, you know, before the rot, like I have this like impulse to want to grab them and use them. Is this like a stupid thing? Should I just let this fantasy go? Could I feasibly, maybe after I gain some chainsaw knowledge and like figure out a way that I could rough mill on site, take it home, and then do something a bit more, you know, productive or usable down the line, and then let it sit for a year and dry or whatever? What are your thoughts, Megan? Am I crazy?
Yes. No, I think that's fantastic. Getting the, I mean, that does bring up the point that like sometimes it's more difficult than others to get logs out of the woods. So another factor that does impact like whether or not we're able to do projects is the accessibility of trees and logs. They, you know, it needs to be accessible by a truck. I mean, I suppose you could haul out board by board, depending on where if you're using like an Alaskan mill or chainsaw mill, you can do a lot anywhere. But Alaskan mills are a lot of work. If you can get a log out and bring it to a sawmill, that's a lot easier than doing it on site, I've found.
So the follow-up question then would be, how long is a log that is worth it, I guess?
It really depends on what you want to make with it. I mean, you wouldn't want a 7-foot log to make a 10-foot table. We've done that for a client, and it was, you know, it's a lot of work. So if you have something in mind that you want to make sure that, or if you're taking down trees and are thinking about like the furniture that that you need for your home, definitely make sure that like the arborist is aware of what your needs are before you get the trees cut. If they're already on the ground, I mean, I would say most logs over maybe like, I mean, with a chainsaw mill, I think the width would be more important than the length. Like you'd want something that would yield some significant slabs if you're going to put the effort into chainsaw milling something.
Thanks.
That was
Sure.
actually, I mean, that was sort of one of my questions is like, what could people do themselves? Or like, is there any piece of this that people could do themselves?
Yeah, I mean, there are Alaskan chainsaw mills.
What is an Alaskan chainsaw mill?
Well, first you need like a really powerful chainsaw. And then it's basically it's an attachment to the chainsaw that rides on rails that you can either clamp or screw to the log. So the chainsaw mill just slides or goes down on those rails, and it's essentially slabs up the log. It's it's a lot of, yeah, it's fun. It takes it's a lot of physical work. I guess I'm kind of a wimp at this point, so I prefer to just bring my logs to a sawmill. But it's a great way to get a log that's hard to access or too large for some other mills. A lot of the portable mills like they cap at around 25 to 30 inches wide. So like if there's an exceptionally large log, sometimes it's just easier to use a chainsaw mill. Yeah, thanks, Ronnie.
We got this might be a shit.
I don't trust anything Amazon like ever. So buy local if you can.
Well, Grandberg International is a really great brand if somebody's looking to buy an
I
Alaskan.
wonder if like places like, well, we have Taylor Rental near us that rents equipment. Do they rent portable mills? Again, like, I don't know that you would want to just be like, I'm going to go get a mill for a day. And
Yeah, well, you can hire a sawyer with a portable mill to come to your house. So that would be just a Google search to find out who's in your area.
they're called sawyers and not, I don't know what I thought it was pronounced. Sawyer?
Yeah, Millers.
Miller Sawyer.
Sawyer.
Yeah, I wanted to share if folks were interested. I did call Catskill Forest Association recently to inquire about the portable sawmill. And they said that the hourly rate for the portable sawmill is something like $250 or $275 per machine hour. So you're billed on not the transportation and sort of other activities. It's exactly when the mill is running and cutting the wood. And that includes the staff, the sawyer, and a couple of assistants to help that process. But they don't do anything with the drying. They just cut the logs.
Yeah. Most sawyers don't have kilns. There's a few in the area, but they're pretty hard to find or get into. I think the closest one here that sometimes dries for people is Roth Lumber in Saugerties. Interested. I know on the other side of the river, Ghent sometimes does some drying.
So theoretically, if you were gonna, take this on yourself, you could have that 2-year time frame, and just be like, I'm just gonna stack the wood somehow. And although I guess you'd have to cover the wood, and do you have to, or actually do you not have to? The ideal situation would be to stack it in an area where it's protected from the weather, and but it still has air going through it. So if there's like a drafty barn or some sort of lean-to, but you can just cover it with either like marine plywood or corrugated metal, like just something with an overhang to keep the weather and sunlight off of the wood to keep it from degrading. And just making sure that you're starting with a level base, like making so that the stack, like as the wood goes up, if there's any twist on uneven ground, that'll be kind of replicated throughout the stack of wood. Right.
Got it. I have a question about how long from the time the tree is down to the time, how much time do I need to decide like how to cut the wood for the wood not to rot, for the logs not to rot?
It kind of depends on the species.
It's ash.
Gosh.
We had, yeah, about a dozen ash trees had to
Ugh,
be taken
so
down. because
sorry.
of the
That
Yeah.
breaks my heart.
It really, yes, me too. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of that wood has been standing dead and is already probably kind of discolored and may have some insect damage. You know, within the next 5 to 6 months, I mean, like ideally you're milling it as soon as you can. If you are not going to be milling it within a couple of months after cutting the trees, it's best to have the logs off of the ground. So if they can be suspended on large like sections of large branches or something to lift them, keep them off the soil, because that contact and with the moisture on the earth will cause the logs to degrade more quickly.
I see.
Also, end painting the logs as soon as you can. There's Arbor Seal. It's a wax paint used for painting the ends of logs, because as the moisture evaporates, there'll be a lot what they call checking, which is cracking in the wood, which will make a certain amount of the wood at the end of the log unusable. So painting the ends of the logs as soon as you can will help with that as well. Thank you.
This isn't what you guys do for sure. But what about using the wood for things like we have, you know, as I was mentioning, we have a kind of a swampy area where all of our white pines are dying. And so one of the things that when we had an arborist come and he was able to take a few of them down, and then he just cut, you know, kind of cut the top off of them to lay the logs down for like temporary ish
Mhm.
paths through the moist area. Like, is there stuff like that you would say people could do at home, or is that, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, if you're comfortable, or if you take a game of logging chainsaw class and feel comfortable taking down your own trees, or having an arborist come and take your trees down. I mean, I would, if there's
what would you do? Okay, but seriously though, if you don't want to like cut your leg off or something, like really, if you're just kind of like a person, maybe with one game of logging chainsaw class behind you, but you don't want to like kill yourself, like what, I mean, if you were just like, here's some things that you guys should think about if you're not going to take something, like if it isn't, I'm just trying to think of all the things that are not, that are down, but would not be worth, you know, treating in the way you're talking about. Like what, I mean, I guess firewood is maybe one of the.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And you know, the cost of that it takes to process it, like pine is kind of tricky because it's usually has too many knots to be used as a building material. You know, but if there is an area on your land where logs could be used, I mean, I think it would be just about identifying what your needs are, and like, is there a tree on your property that's already down or needs to come down that can fill that need?
What are the big trees, Megan? Like, what would you say? Like, what are the ones that you're like, yay, this tree fell down? Oh wait, Julie has okay, Julia, keep your
yay, the tree fell down.
yeah, they never yay too. Okay, but like, well, because like, so, or what are the trees that are tricky? Like ash, as you said, I don't know if ash is more tricky because of, you know, because of the particular ways that all of the ash trees are dying now. Like if that, as you said, it might have insect damage. So what are the ones that are like better and less better?
Well, I think we're gonna, I mean, ash is getting trickier and trickier because as it stands dead, if you know, like ash trees shatter, they don't fall over, you know, like they'll break into pieces because the wood gets really brittle. So there is like a period where it's usable, and then there's, you know, at a certain point it's hard, it gets harder and harder to use. Oaks tend to be, I mean, most white oak is very desirable because you can use it indoors or outdoors, which is nice. It's very rot resistant.
Do we have a lot of white oak around this
No,
area?
mostly red oak, but there are some white oaks. Eastern red cedar is another great rot resistant wood. Black locust. So if you're doing outdoor projects, those are the 3 native species that we recommend. I've heard catalpa actually is
Really?
fairly rot resistant. And they're like for people that don't know what catalpa is, they have like the really large kind of tropical looking leaves and beans that grow in the fall. Like right now, or pretty soon they'll have these white clusters of flowers. They're beautiful trees.
Yeah.
And it's a softer wood, so it's a little easier to work with than like oak or black locust. For indoor, I mean, everybody loves black walnut. We work a lot. We've been working with cherry a little bit lately, which is one of, I personally think it's beautiful. Pardon. But I think hickory can be a little difficult to work with. It's very dense and it tends to twist a fair amount, but we've done some furniture with that. But I'd say most of the work that we do is with oak, a lot of red oak. Ruth, who's on the call, we're doing some projects with her red oak.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Wait, is that Ruth who lives near me in Kerhonkson?
I don't know. Maybe she's building.
Off of well, I don't want to I think.
Yeah.
we know Ruth. At least.
Hey,
Ruth-
I'm sorry, I'm on my phone and I don't know how to use my video.
Oh my God, is that you? Is that the Ruth Freeman who I know too?
That's Ruth Freeman. Yes, it is.
Oh my gosh, exciting.
Hi,
Yeah, our
neighbor.
brand actually touches each other. I think
That's
or
right.
come very close to, if not.
Yes,
So.
yes.
Oh, that's cool. So you're doing stuff right there.
It's getting picked up tomorrow.
Oh, great. I'm so excited.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk, Ruth, but you could sort of explain
Oh yeah.
a little bit if you're comfortable. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no problem. I'm sorry I can't use my video for some reason. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I know it's great. We had a site visit together and it was so informative to learn what wood I actually had to use. Megan, as you know too, I'm in the middle of building a house, so we had to clear
Yep.
more than I wanted to, but because we had to do a leach field and everything. But what I thought was so great is learning how much could be made from what I have. I thought maybe I would get a table, but what am I getting, Megan? Like,
A table, a bed,
yes,
some stools, some shelving.
some
right.
shelving, right, and some side tables.
Some
I think so. Stools, but it was just amazing to think. I just didn't know that you could get that much out of a couple of logs. So.
You have about 10, right?
Oh, right. But I'm not sure we were. Well, anyway, they're not super long, right? Or the diameter.
Yeah. There's a couple big red oaks, but yeah, some of them are smaller and yeah. But we figure out what are the best logs we went through all of Ruth's needs and then figured out which of the logs we needed to be able to fulfill all of that. And so there are probably some that a commercial mill wouldn't have considered, but they're big enough to process and get a good amount of wood out of.
Right.
Julie,
Yeah.
you put your hand up for a minute there.
Yeah, okay, so I live in southern Westchester and I don't really have access to trees we have trees that fall down, but it's, I wouldn't be able to preserve them for tables. So my question is, I'm looking at my disgusting coffee table over here in front of me and I would love a new one. Is this something that I could order from you or, help? And I have no design skills whatsoever, so I entrust all of that to you. Is that something that you do too? If you don't have access to your own wood, if for someone like me?
Yes. Well, yeah.
Okay.
We also have we have a collection of furniture on our website.
Uh-huh.
And then we also, if there's not something that you see there, we do custom fabrication so that we could kind of figure out, you could send us photos of your space. We could figure out or make some suggestions of what might work well in that space and what wood species or finishes would be ideal. But yeah, it's actually kind of refreshing to not do everything custom from someone's own trees. A lot of variables and things that always work out the way that you want them to, but So we do have the line furniture.
And
I just threw the website there, but it's just
Oh, yeah.
newyorkheartwoods.com. But there's, well, I assume people are allowed to visit your studio. Is
Yeah.
that- Yeah.
Yeah.
So their studio is absolutely stunning, and you can see some of the pieces and some of the, the finishes and everything is just so, I mean, that to me, it's true. Like that to me already having something that you guys made, even if it wasn't from a tree, that's already very special, I think.
I agree. I think so too. And just to this group of probably tree lovers, and it sounds like a bunch of nature lovers, I spent, for the first time I went to Muir Woods and saw the redwoods, and it was just spectacular and blew my mind.
Yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah.
And then, I don't, I have family in that area, and it's like when you read about how they just, I mean, that's actually such a good environmental story. They were like, there's millions of redwoods, we can cut them all down. And it's
Right.
like, they just decimated huge areas of these beautiful, enormous trees and the ecosystems and everything else. So it's like, it's kind of like heartbreak whenever I stop and read the like little plaques about like, here's the oldie timey guy, with like 12 guys like sawing stuff, but just like the speed that they were able to get through huge redwood forests, even without any technology it's rough. We have there's someone near us that, it's interesting because there is a certain amount of removing trees that can be very healthy for a forest, and like fires and things. I mean, I'm not an expert in this, but someone near us just had a logging company come through and say it was for the health of their forest kind of, and it like literally is like, it looked like a devastated moonscape to me. Like I feel like they left every fifth tree, and I'm just like, how on earth?
Yeah.
It's sad. They take so long to grow, I mean, it's.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's still a lot of high grading, which is just taking the largest and best trees out of the forest, which just depletes the overall health for perpetuity, So yeah, that's why, I mean, we try just to encourage people not to take down trees that don't need to come down. I mean, there are, of course, instances where that's unavoidable, or, I mean, and taxes on land are expensive, and people have a lot of reasons for needing to take down trees. But, like on this, like in a changing climate, we kind of need them more than ever, like they're more valuable standing than in any other form. So we just try to make the most of the ones that are already coming down.
This is one of the questions that I had that's sort of a weird one. But it was one of the ones that I was thinking about when I was thinking about us speaking today is, I think, well, let me preface it by saying, when we first moved up here, and I remember speaking with people who do kind of like landscape design and things, furniture looks spectacular. Their furniture is spectacular. And I remember just like talking to people who do landscape design and them saying like, yeah, if we plant this and and like your garden's really going to look good like 4 years in. And like, you have this, like, they put the little, little tree with a little deer fence around it. And I was like, what the actual hell? Can nobody like just can no one just make a garden that like looks normal quickly? And it was like, I had no concept of time. Like the idea that something could take more than instantly was like really hard for me to kind of understand. And I think to do what you do, to think how you do, and to think about the environment and also the longevity of a piece of furniture, you have to be able to think in those longer time spans. And it's funny because I will say that I was thinking about how, well, we have IKEA kitchen cabinets here, and they're like very functional, very inexpensive. And I was like, they last a long time, and it's like, but we're on year 8 and it's chipping, and it's chipping in a way that's not like cute. It's not like, if a wooden, if a proper solid wood door got a little weathered, it looks nice. This looks not nice. But 7 years ago, 7 years seemed like a long time. So how do you think that you even, have you always been able to like think in terms of past your own lifetime, not to be like too philosophical, or like how do you think about these things without just kind of getting freaked out and wanting to run
I
screaming?
remember reading a long time ago that I think it was at Oxford University that there was this beam, the structural beam that the builders knew would need to be replaced after 300 years or something. So they planted an oak so that by the time it was that age, it would be perfect for, to replace the beam. And, so I like that had just a huge impact on the way that I think of just, it's like we plant trees for the furniture that we make, and it takes a long time for those trees to become, as significant as the trees that we use. But I think thinking about that cycle of life is like, for me, it's really important. Does that answer your question?
It does. No, it does. No, I think it's I think yes. And the other part is probably just like years of therapy or something that I probably need, or you have, whatever. But it's like, I don't know what it is, but I think I just think it's really interesting. And I think what you just said is actually a really good example of saying like that someone who is putting a beam in is literally thinking about what happens in 300 years. And I will also say, I think the other issue now is that things are so inexpensive to just get more stuff. So you wouldn't think about the beam in 300 years. You would just assume that like someone's going to cut, like for some price, they're going to be able to find a tree to cut down somewhere and get you your beam.
Right. And also Oxford is an institution that's probably not going anywhere anytime soon. And we are pretty transient at, compared to how people used to live. So it doesn't always make sense, but there's still like the gesture of, I think, giving back for what you take that I appreciate.
Well, one of the, it's funny because one of the things that, not like haha funny, but like one of the things that we see so much in real estate is one of the most sought after attributes of any house up here is character.
Mhm.
Like that's it. It's like that is, and what I've thought a lot about what character means. Like what is character? When people come in and they go, this house has character. It's like I have some like kind of there's some kind of superficial things about, I can picture it in my mind, but what I think it is actually the evidence of another human being having worked on it or having lived there.
Mhm.
I actually think that's what character is. Because when I think about what it describes, like I'm looking here in front of me is our kind of like weird stone fireplace, and it's like, I love it. I love it. And no one would build it today because it's like kind of weird. And I kind of feel like someone just found some stones and learned how to cement. They did like Cement Games 101 or whatever. They like built it and I love it. And it makes me feel really good, like way better than if it was like something that's super pristine. And I think that's what, when you have furniture that, especially if you're lucky enough to be able to meet the people who are making it, that sense that someone else has left their mark on it, I think is, I don't know, there's just something so magical about that.
Well, yeah, and you can tell when something's made by hand versus just fabricated by a machine. Like it just feels different. I think the things that we make, people tend like, you also take care of it in a different way. Like we use a lot of oil finishes that require people like, reapply the oil like once a year, but then you have a relationship with that piece. It's not something that's just passively in your home. We can also use bulletproof finishes for people with children and teenagers, but I think that it's like when you especially when we're working with someone's own trees and then they can be a part of the milling process and just like see where that board came from, like from the tree, from their yard. And it just becomes this really, it is really magical, like we've worked with families that have had kids, and like just to know too that like that's being instilled on their young minds, like that, you know, wood came from this living being that they used to see in this other form. And I think that appreciation for material is, you know, or just like where things come from. I think there's a lot of, you know, it's like kind of akin, like for me, like the way that we work is sort of similar to the local food movement. You know, it's like what you have in your backyard, or like knowing the farmer, and knowing, you know, every hand that touched something that, you know, ends up in your home. Like there's just that level of integrity and care that that I, you know, a lot of our clients at least appreciate.
I think that's, you know what, Megan, I love that. And I think that is, I'm sure that anybody who goes through that process with their family or as an individual, whatever, and sees even just buying a piece of furniture from you guys, I bet it changes. And this is also what the local food movement and like farmers markets are going to farms to buy things. I bet it changes how they perceive everything that's made. Certainly everything that's made with wood.
Mhm.
Because even though they loved that one tree that like was next to their house or whatever, like the tree that the caca stuff is made out of,
Yeah.
it's the same. You know what I mean? It's like, it just is like, we don't see it. So we're not seeing it getting cut down, and like no one's sort of kind of mourning its loss or whatever. And I think I'm sure it makes things feel, it would make you inclined to have a lot fewer disposable items.
Mhm.
How-
Yeah. Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, there, you know, there is an inherent luxury in being able to afford like something that is made by hand, you know, so there is that too. So it's, you know, I think we do what we can when we can.
Yeah, no, and I think yeah, again, that's like a bigger conversation. That's like, like, how come we can buy seven, there was just an article today about, like, again, like if you buy a $7 t-shirt, it's probably because
Right.
it's not made in a way that you would feel good about if you saw it,
Right.
so there are right now to get something like you have is going to be expensive. I see Caleb and Lisa have raised their hand. Do you guys have a question? No, they just left. They're like, we raised our hand to say stop. Bye. Yeah, exactly. Actually, it is almost 9:00. So does anybody else have any other questions? Oh, they're back. Maybe they're back. Maybe they did want to say something. Caleb and Lisa, did you guys want to say something? We saw you raise your hand and then you exited stage right, or whatever that phrase is. Nope. Okay, in the meantime, when he's asking, any field guide or book recommendation for tree ID? Or best woods for for best woods for making what?
Yes, and I don't, do I have it with me? Ronnie, I'll send you the link, or I'll send it to anyone here. I don't have the title with me, but I do have a really good one that I can send you.
I have a really good app for tree identification.
Oh, Picture This is helpful.
Picture This.
Mhm.
Picture This is fantastic. It's so much fun also. Yeah. It's accurate because they show you 12 million photos and they're like, is this the thing that you're looking at? And then if you're like, nope, it's not, then you can take a bunch more photos.
Yeah, it's not necessarily great for winter tree identification. It can definitely mess up the bark IDs, but
The leaves.
yeah, leaves help.
But it's really fun, and you get to learn. I mean, they have like a whole bunch of information about the plant and stuff. I mean, I kind of walk around annoyingly picturing like this. I think Google actually has some good ID stuff now, but it's pretty great. Are there any good, oh, you were gonna say that so a book about like which tree which type of wood you could use for which thing. That's the one you might need to think about.
Did you want to know about wood and or tree identification, Ronnie?
It was both of them.
Both? Okay, yeah, I can send you a little reading list.
Are you going to do classes? other than our chainsaw class when I find 8 people?
Yeah, we're actually talking about, I mean, we've been talking about it for a long time, but we're looking at starting some classes later this summer. Both Lindsay and Ashira, my colleagues, have been taking chair making classes. And I think one of the first ones we're going to do is shave horse for chair parts. And then that'll graduate into a greenwood chair making class, which would be really fun. That could be something that someone could do from their own trees with like little to no machinery, and a lot of hand tools. We have like a greenwood spoon carving person who's great. We were talking about just doing tool confidence classes, mostly for women and non-binary folk, but opening that up eventually. I've done log to lumber workshops in the past. So people that really want to see the process, doing something like that. There's actually a woman who wants to do a chainsaw carving class, which I'm very excited about.
Really?
So I think the first one would be 2D, just like surface textures. And then the second one would be 3D, actual sculpting. So if if I get all your emails, well, I have some of your emails, but I can put you on our mailing list, and when those come out.
I can send you everybody's emails who registered too, for sure. We can do that. And then, if you have a chainsaw class, if you have anything else, then we can. And also if you guys write too, so I'm just Megan, MEGA, well, same as other Megan, MEGAN at upstatecurious.com. You can also write me and be like, do a chainsaw class. And I will 1,000,000% hassle people to get enough,
Yeah.
to do that. Cause that'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'll reach out to the guy I know and make sure, see if he's still teaching, or just find somebody else in the organization that if we decided to do a private class. I think 10 years ago, it might be like $200 a person, whereas like the one that Ronnie signed up for, there's like these subsidized classes that I think are only $25. They make it really accessible for farmers and landowners. So I can send you the link to that too, Megan, that you could share.
That was the Catskill Forest Association one, right?
Yeah.
We should put that, I'll put that in the, when I send out we can talk about we can add some links to the email that I send out to everybody who registered for this. So, because a lot of people obviously can't always make things at this exact time. So when I send the recording and when we have send out our newsletter with this, we can add a couple other things. Like obviously we'll add to your website, but $175 for non-members, $150 for members. So that's not that different if it is $200 for yours. For Catskill Forest Association.
Yeah. There's one organization that offers them every year, mostly for farmers, but they have a grant so they can subsidize them. And I think they're $25 or $35 and they fill up pretty quickly, but you can get on their mailing list so that they may have already filled up for this year, but for future reference, they're handy.
Do you okay, random last question. I don't even know why I'm asking this, but do you garden also? Like, cause you look at big growing things, or you like, oh, that's so quick and fun. Like, make a vegetable. Or are you like, no, I'm already doing things with my hands all day long?
I'm more of a forager than a gardener.
That makes sense. A creature of the woods.
Yeah. I'd rather just be outside, kind of exploring places that feel more wild than in a cultivated garden. But I appreciate other people gardening.
I know, me too. I appreciate all my friends who garden when it becomes the time when they have too much of everything. And I get to make my own zucchini bread with none of the effort. So
yeah. I think when I retire, I'll do like a master gardening certification or something, but not for a while.
For a while. Awesome. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to say, Megan, before we?
I just didn't know if Caleb actually had a question.
Oh, Caleb, yeah, your hand's up again. Sorry. Did you have a question?
I did. Yeah, I accidentally hung up earlier.
Okay, awesome. Yeah.
No,
Oh, and Sally, hand is up too. Sorry.
So I also am a small business owner and a small furniture maker. And I was wondering when we were talking about that kind of client relationship that you develop, And when you have that conversation about things being handmade and therefore it is going to cost more, I often have that hurdle talking budget with clients and with business owners in general about having that like difficult conversation about money and that it's an heirloom product that they're getting and added value towards those kinds of things. I just wanted to know what your experience was and what any tools that you've developed to navigate those kind of conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the reality that some people will understand that more than others. Unfortunately, it's, I mean, a lot of people recognize the value, but the reality is that they can only spend so much on something. And so if you can value engineer it, that might help. But if you can't, then I think I've learned to just stand by our ethos and the way that we work. The times that we've compromised, sometimes it's come back to bite us. So
Yeah.
but it was really like a client that broke that, like I mentioned before, that broke down. Just like they actually made a list of how much money they spent on all of this stuff that they didn't like or want, for perpetuity. And then they realized, like what we were charging based on or compared to what they had spent over like the last 15 years of, moving around and just cobbling things together was pretty similar, or even a little bit less. So I think it's, like getting people to think about, like what it is that they are spending money on and like how long that will really last. And that's helped our conversations a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oftentimes it's we try and drive the kind of our practices of finding local sawyers and using sustainable materials and mostly hand tools and that type of thing to custom joinery, custom design. All of those things take time and effort, and to translate that sometimes can be a little bit difficult, I think. I mean, obviously talking about money in any scenario is never fun for anybody. But yeah.
And we prefer to do joinery over fasteners as much as possible, but like sometimes the budget just doesn't allow for it, and then we have to decide if we want to do the project or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For myself, we don't use mechanical fasteners. It's just something that we don't go for it. And that does.
What's your business? So we know where you are.
Oh, I'm in Pittsburgh.
You're Pittsburgh, cool.
Yeah, I'm a Pittsburgh-based artist. It's called Custom Woodworking PGH.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Hello. We've been on Instagram for a little while. But yeah, we make custom designed furniture for small installations, homes, all standalone, so no built-in of any sort. But we focus on working with local sawyers as well as finding lumber, very much like Heartwood, New York Heartwoods, that have either fallen from somebody's home or and try to steward that to the best of our ability. But that's predominantly what we do.
Yeah.
From the client perspective of someone who would always prefer to buy things like this, how I justify it in my mind is twofold. One is the like the times per like cost per use of something. So like if it's your dining table or if it's a coffee table or like your bed and you're going to look at it and be happy with it 6 times a day forever, that really is meaningful to me. And I'm just like, right in front of me is a coffee table that my grandparents had in their house that I look at 16 times a day and still appreciate. And so that I think is real. Like you're going to use those pieces of furniture a lot, and you'll feel good every time you use them. I think that I think increasingly there are some people who will, or a fair amount of people who are happier to pay some difference more to get things that are locally and support local craftspeople and support, you know, things being made in ethical ways, and having you guys not like have to starve to death to be able to make these things, you know. I hope that that's true, but
Mhm.
I don't know. I think that's the that I think that's the $1 million question. Like, how can all, like, we all technically for us to really make changes that will impact the environment, we all have to pay more for basically everything, which is not going to be easy for huge portions of the population. So for some people who have a more flexible budget, it's like, you know, like steak shouldn't cost what it costs. Clothes shouldn't, you know what I mean? Clothing shouldn't cost, like it all is too cheap right now, which is a big part of the problem. So
Yeah, and running into the fast furniture phase that has been in the furniture industry has been kind of a big issue over the past almost decade now, which is, you know, one reason why we practice kind of how we practice, and I think that goes for, you know, Megan as well, is you know, trying to steward trees and to have another life, because you know, the way mass-produced furniture is now, it's only going to last for a couple years, and then the fasteners are going to break, and then you can't replace it, you can't repair it. There's not repairable items, and that just goes to a dump, and that's really horribly sad. And so fighting that, and fighting is a really bad word to use because it's so aggressive, but trying to change that behavior and people's way of shopping and asking questions before purchase something, and also investing the money that they do have for things that will last a long time, I think is really an important driver to continue to kind of push in our industry, at least. The fashion industry has dealt with it, the food industry has dealt with it, but the furniture industry is really kind of dealing with it more over this past couple decades than it has ever before. So there's quite a bit of data that has been put out recently about how much has been dumped into waste from furniture, and it's, you know, in the 9 to 12 million tons over the last, you know, every year.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Yeah, plus the environmental impact of, I mean, a lot of cheap wood furniture comes, like, there's a lot of stolen forests. I mean, and and like the social cost, the environmental cost of that. I just went to this conference a couple weeks ago called Design for Freedom. It was about like the forced labor in the construction industries and in the supply chains, and just like how much, you know, like of a slave tax is on a lot of the inexpensive things that we buy. And just like from a human rights perspective too, just like to be able to stand by, like, you know, every hand that's touched that piece of wood from the time it was a tree until it was a finished thing. You know, there's a, you know, there's, I think this, you know, that story and being able to articulate it to people who care about those sorts of things is, you know, really the best that we can do right
Yeah.
now.
you know, and I'll say I would applaud you guys for just talking about this. Oh, and just raising, I don't know if did I just freeze for a second? My internet's gotten a little weird. No, okay. I was gonna say, I think it's great for you guys even to be talking about these things and sort of gently challenging the way, because it is hard once you start to get used to, like, the idea of ordering like a side table from Amazon for $25 was like, that was not a thing even, I would say, even 5 years ago.
Mhm.
You know, Amazon didn't sell. I mean, as far as, I mean, it seems like a relatively recent phenomenon that you could actually order furniture there. And now, so to go from, like, for me also to be like, oh wait, that's not what, you know, like, I live in a rural, but the difference between like ordering a side table and getting it in 2 days for $25 versus like waiting 6 months for a custom side table that might be a few $100s, it's a big difference. So you have to kind of like get your head around it even if you have the means to be able to make that kind of a decision. And I think that
And the patience too,
and
you know, as a purchaser. I mean, that's you know, the decreased amount that our attention spans as humans have changed since phones and social media has really taken control of hijacked, as they say, hijacked our attention span. we expect things quickly, like Grubhub. We can order our food and have it be here in an hour, or you know,
Unless you
everything.
live where we live.
Yeah, yeah. In the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a concern that needs change, behavioral change, but that is done by challenging the consumer. Yeah.
But there, I'm really surprised at the amount of people that are like, we have a lot of wood drying that people don't need furniture for like a year, year and a half. So I think finding people who are at the beginning stages of construction is like one way to really get into the natural flow of that time frame. Because like the trees are come down, you know, to build a house, the house is going to take 1 to 2 years. And if you know, they may or may not have like a strong sense of what the furniture is going to be, but at least, you know, they can get engaged in the cycle and be a part of that conversation, and then see every step along the way of it becoming something.
I love that. It's a smart idea too.
Mm.
So, well, thank everybody thank you all for being here. Is what I'm trying to say. Thank everyone. Until I don't stay up past 9 o'clock very much here in our land of no Grubhub, but beautiful makers and craftspeople and gardeners of all kinds. And Megan, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah,
And,
thanks you all for being here. Thanks for inviting me, Megan.
Yeah, it's super interesting, and I am so excited to send it to everyone with some fun little links. And so we'll get that out. We should be able to get that out tomorrow. So thanks. Nice to meet you also.
Yeah.
Caleb, if you want to like send me your information, I can throw that in here too. If you want to just Megan at upstatecurious.com, I'll throw that in the newsletter.
Yeah, I'll send it to you in the chat. Does that work?
Perfect. Yeah.
Cool. There we go.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.